Ask Reddit.
People who used a bar's safe word or secret drink to escape a bad date. What happened, and how did the staff react? Story 1. I went out with a couple of friends and one of them brought a guy she barely knew who was basically a rebound. He was a strange guy. He was trying to put his hand down her pants and blouse in the middle of the restaurant, yes, a real restaurant, at 6 p.m., so it wasn't exactly empty. She told him no and to stop several times, but he ignored her and just told her to fuck off and not give a fuck. When my friends went to the bathroom and he went to smoke, I went to the bar and asked if Eileen was working because my friend needed help. The guy understood what I meant, sent a waitress to the restroom, radioed the bouncer, who came over and told the guy he was out of control and had to leave. The guy punched the bouncer, called me a ferret, and then two big bouncers dragged him out. They called the police, and I have no idea what happened next. It couldn't have been handled better. Story 2. My boss had to do this. The poor girl was being harassed by her ex, and she asked if Angela was working. He said yes and took her upstairs to meet her until the police arrived to deal with the guy. The second worst part is that she was really lucky he was trained in that because none of the rest of us were, even though there were signs all over the building literally saying, staff specially trained to assist victims who ask for Angela. I would have known, and many of my co-workers probably would have, but not because we were trained in that, and she was incredibly lucky to find the right person. I don't know what happened to her after that, but I hope she's safe and sound. Story 3. I was the employee in this situation. I was the production manager for a Christmas photo shoot at a mall, mostly photos with Santa. One of my employees was 17 and had an ex who would occasionally show up and give her weird looks/harass her while she was working. Usually, if I pointed it out to security, it was enough, and he'd leave. One night, after closing time, he asked me to take her to his car in another parking lot because he was waiting outside. I gladly obliged. When we were leaving, I saw him smoking a cigarette near another exit, just standing there. We went to his car, and he watched us drive away. It wasn't much, but at least I made sure he got home safely that night. Our season ended shortly after that and we parted ways, so I don't know if she got a restraining order or some other solution to get him to stop bothering her. Story 4. Sorry, this is kind of unrelated, but I had to interrupt a coworker in the middle of a conversation with a guy to get her out of there and make up a lie about it being an emergency. I worked with a girl who, to put it mildly, was incredibly silly. Silly in a cute way, like a Disney character, all smiles and a complete airhead. Very sweet, a talented athlete and artist, but, let's just say, the kind of girl who would try to order Uber Eats at camp and not understand why that wasn't possible. Anyway, one day a random guy showed up at the bar. My spidey senses instantly went off when he walked up to the bar without sitting down and asked if another female bartender was working. The girl said no, she doesn't normally work those shifts. The guy then asked her when she worked. My bartender was about to give a stranger another bartender's schedule, so I grabbed her to tell her she was needed in the kitchen now. Once we were cleared away, I told her to never give strangers the schedules or personal information of other servers. She rolled her eyes and said something like, "What's the problem?" Then I asked her if she'd thought about why that guy didn't sit down for a drink. Why did he want to know her schedule? I'd never met him before. She has a boyfriend. Use your head. Anyway, it was a good time to teach him something. I went back to the client to ask if he wanted to leave a message. He said no, he'd just come back, to which I said, "Please don't." He swallowed and left. I asked the girl he was looking for if she knew him and she said yes, he was some creepy guy who once tried to get her number and she told him to fuck off, so she somehow found out where he worked. Never tell people your schedule. Story 5. Honestly, I didn't know there was such a thing as a code word in bars and stuff. I completely understand why. Some people are just super weird. Several years ago, my wife and I, along with several friends, went to a place we really like to get drinks and dance. We'd been there for about 10 minutes and were waiting patiently in line to order drinks at the bar. It was then that I noticed a girl whose general behavior with a guy was very awkward, as he kept leaning over her, grabbing her arm, and talking to her, obviously making her uncomfortable. I looked at my wife, who hadn't realized what was going on, and told her to wait, that I had to do something, even though I was quite nervous. I'm not a confrontational person. I didn't know how this was going to play out, but I had to try, so I walked up to her, gently put my hand on her back and with a big smile said, "Hey babe. I'm so sorry I'm late, we were staying at some guy's name's house and I finally got here, I'm so sorry." I then turned to the guy and looked at her and asked, "Hey. Who is this?" and introduced myself and held out my hand. The guy instantly backed off and mumbled some shit and left her alone for the rest of the night. I introduced myself to her and told her to find me or a member of staff if the weirdo approached her again, which he didn't, and I went on my merry way. She and her friends seemed to have a good time afterward and came up to me later to thank me for intervening. I'm glad I was there, I'm glad I was attentive, and I'm glad I had the guts to intervene and get him out of the way. I don't know if his situation would have gotten any worse, but thankfully we'll never have to find out. So, hey, guys, girls, whoever's reading this, if you see someone in a situation like this, take a chance and step in to help them. At worst, if you mess up, you might look like a considerate jerk, but there's no harm in trying. Story 6. Not exactly a safe word situation, but certainly a cautionary tale. At a bar, a guy was being a little too clever with a female friend. She was wearing a very low-cut top, so he thought it was an invitation to take pictures of her from the next table for his collection, without asking permission. Yuck. I advised him, without swearing or threatening violence, that this wasn't right and that he needed to delete the photos. His friend decided to act macho. Fortunately, he must have had enough to not realize they were outnumbered, 2 against 12, so they quickly realized they weren't going to win. I went to the bar to calm down, because I was definitely in the mood for a fight at that point, and let's be honest, that's never a good thing in any place with a lot of glassware. No matter how much you want to act like a tough guy, someone is going to get hurt, and it could be someone you care about, so why take the risk? Even if you beat someone up, you risk getting charged. At the bar, a friend asked me what was going on, and I told him. They were ready to fight. I said let's leave it at that, but at that moment the bar staff overheard. They're obviously bothered by people talking about fights in their establishment, so I explained exactly why I'm giving the situation a 20-foot distance so it won't be the problem. Turns out, dive bars staffed by women really don't like jerks. I've never seen so many baseball bats pulled out so quickly. The staff had a very brief conversation with the jerk and his friend. A camera was smashed. They were kicked out immediately afterward. I was told very firmly that if it ever happened again, to let the staff know first and let them handle it. Story 7. I went on a first date with a guy I met online. I'm 22, he was 38, which I thought might be okay, until he immediately started talking about how girls my age are much more appreciative, and how he prefers women who haven't been ruined by bad relationships. He kept getting really close, saying he liked how innocent I looked, and then, out of nowhere, he started groping my thigh under the table while talking about how soft and obedient I looked. I froze. It was that kind of disgusting touch where you don't want to make a scene, but your whole body is screaming to get lost. I excused myself to the bathroom, stopped by the bar, and quietly asked the bartender if Angela was working tonight. He just nodded and said, "This way." Within a minute, an employee found me near the restroom and told me someone was waiting outside. They escorted me around back, stayed with me while I called a cab, and made sure I was safe. He texted me the next day saying he hoped I'd learn to be more polite. I was immediately blocked and reported. Story 8. It's not the same, but I was working nights at a gas station when 2 girls came in, and you could tell they were uncomfortable. Looking outside, I saw a group of guys at a pump, drunk as skunks, and I figured they were probably harassing them. I'm not one for confrontation, but I couldn't leave them to fend for themselves. When they went to pay, I asked them if the guys outside were giving them trouble. They said they were, but they didn't want to make a scene either. So I told them to act like they were my friends and that they could stay as long as they wanted, either until they felt brave enough to leave or until the jerk patrol left. They stayed, and 20 minutes later the guys left because they didn't want to risk coming in and causing trouble, I guess. The girls stayed for another hour after that, hanging out with me and relaxing. We became real friends after that, and they would occasionally stop by to see me. I don't work there anymore, but I still try to do what I can when I'm at a gas station at night and there are cashiers. Since idiot men only respect other men, I'll use myself as a deterrent any day. If you see something, say something. Story 9. Amazing. I was in Syracuse for a short work trip. I had a drink at the hotel bar and started chatting with a guy sitting a few tables away. We ended up going to a bar nearby, and my instincts told me something was wrong and this wasn't going to end well. He ordered me a drink from across the bar, which was weird. I took it to the bathroom and threw it away, then saw a sign about using a code word to tell the staff if you were uncomfortable with something. I went to the bar, said the word to one of the bartenders, and she immediately pulled me out the back, without making a fuss, and took me back to my hotel. She texted me the next day to check on me. I often think about her and how kind and selfless she was to help a complete stranger in her time of need. Story 10. I didn't use a safe word, but years ago in Austin, a friend and I were partying. We were at the bar, but facing the stage to watch the live music. There was a mirror behind the bar, and as I was half turned to talk to her, I saw an old man leaning behind her to sniff her hair. My mouth fell open. He noticed, so he started pretending to lean in to talk to her. The bartender saw this and wrote me a note asking if we needed help. I nodded. Not a minute later he came around the bar, grabbed the guy by the shoulder, "I think the girls want to be left alone," and kicked him out. Story 11. In the mid-80s, I was hanging out with a friend of a friend. We went to the drive-in. It was around the time the new orange slice came out. He had an open can and asked if I wanted to try it. I said no, but he kept insisting I try it, so I did. A small sip. The next thing I knew, I was waking up. I knew something wasn't right, so I told him I had to use the bathroom. I walked in, and my eyes were red. Not bloodshot. Not pink. Red. I couldn't get anyone to help me. I had to get back in the car with this guy and have him drive me, angrily, to my brother's apartment for a family emergency. I had used the pay phone to call a friend who wasn't home, and that's when I came up with this plan. I was 17 years old. Story 12. Slightly off topic, a friend and I are having drinks and two people are clearly on a date on the stools next to us. She goes to the bathroom and a minute later my friend elbows me and points to the woman's glass where she's dissolving a pill. We had a quiet discussion about the best way to deal with this: take him outside and beat him up, or tell the bartender. We told the bartender and she quickly threw away the drink and went to meet the woman in the bathroom before kicking the guy out. The woman was terrified, and the police couldn't be called because the pill was gone, down the drain. I've never been much of a fighter, but I still wish we'd hurt that guy. Story 13. When I was training for my first 5K, I developed a routine of running 5K every other day and walking 5K on my rest days. I did this at the same time every day and took the same route every day. I listened to audiobooks while I ran/walked. So I was kind of in my own world when I realized the same guy had been following me for the last mile. I took a detour I didn't normally take, down a street that wouldn't make much sense for anyone to take unless they lived around there, and he followed me. Once I got off that street and he was still behind me. I knew he was following me. I turned a new corner and saw an older couple in their garden, working. Before he could turn the corner and see me, I ran up to them and explained that someone was following me. They immediately pulled me into their backyard and out of sight. We saw him look up and down the street and then walk slowly and repeatedly down the street looking for me. We heard him let out an angry shout, and then he left the way he had come. He was shaking and crying at this point. It turns out the husband of the elderly couple who helped me was my town's retired police chief. I'll call him Dave and his wife Carla for the rest of this story. Dave kept telling me I did the right thing. He called the police to file a report. I did, and the officers kindly drove me home and went inside with me to check out the house and talk to my husband to see if he'd noticed anything strange. Dave gave me his number and asked me to text him every time I went for a walk/run. I didn't go out for a few days, but eventually I did and took the same route, but in reverse. After my first turn, I immediately saw the guy walking ahead of me. I ducked behind a tree and called Dave. He told me to wait until the guy turned off that street and immediately run to his house, since it was only one street away, in the opposite direction the guy was heading, presumably because he assumed I'd be on my normal route. If I was, I would have walked right into him. I ran to Dave and Carla's house and sat inside with them while he had a meltdown. After a while, we watched as the guy once again paced up and down the street. Then he stood on the corner and waited for over an hour before getting frustrated and leaving. They took me home and told me not to run again unless my husband went with me or we went somewhere else to run. I'll jump ahead a bit. Long story short, the police were able to find the guy based on my description and some photos Carla was able to take. The police kept an eye on the guy for a while and eventually arrested him for kidnapping a woman. She walked away unharmed. As they were preparing to try him for kidnapping, it came out that he had a history of kidnapping and raping women. I testified at the trial along with Dave and Carla. I didn't attend the day of the verdict because I couldn't bear it if they let him go free. After it was all over, Carla called me to tell me he was in prison for at least 15 years. It turned out he'd kidnapped and/or raped more than 40 women in the past 15 years. One of the women is still missing. The police reopened his missing person case and are trying to figure out what happened to him so they can try him for that as well, hoping to keep him behind bars permanently. I'm crying as I write this. Dave and Carla are my guardian angels. They don't like gardening and had never gardened before or since that day. If it had been literally any other day, they wouldn't have been outside, and I wouldn't have met them. I still visit them a few times a week, and they've become permanent members of my family. We talk on the phone daily. They're now good friends with my parents and in-laws. They come to every holiday party, as they have no living children and their siblings are across the country. They had a son and a daughter who have passed away. Their son was killed by a drunk driver, and their daughter took her own life from postpartum depression. I truly feel like my path crossed with theirs so I could be a surrogate daughter for them. When I started a new job with an hour-long commute, Dave started waking up at 6 a.m. so he could call me while I was driving. He'd talk to me for the entire hour, and we'd talk while I was in the parking lot walking to my office building. Only when I was safely in my office did he hang up and always say, "Have a great day, kiddo, I'm 33, by the way, call me when you're packing up to leave." Then we'd talk while I was leaving the office to head home. God bless Dave and Carla. I truly believe they saved my life. Story 14. As someone who has worked in several bars in the UK over the years, I've seen this used several times. Our protocol differed slightly from place to place, but the general standard was to immediately take the person to a private space and ask for details/how we could help. No matter how busy it was instilled in all employees to take this seriously. We would usually inform security if we had one and/or have the person escorted to a taxi by the bouncers or a member of staff. When I later trained staff for a new bar, I made sure everyone knew how important these protocols were. To the people across the bar, we, the bar staff, are paying attention. Your safety is important, and don't be afraid to use safety equipment or talk to us if you need help. Story 15. It started out like any other awkward first date conversation, drinks, nothing unusual. But halfway through, he leaned in close, smiled, and said, "If you ever ghost me, just remember. I'm really good at finding people." My stomach sank. I took it lightly, excused myself, and went to the bar. I told the bartender I needed an angel. Shot with a twist. He didn't even blink, just nodded silently and walked away. A minute later, security showed up and asked the guy to step out. It turns out he had a knife on him. I still don't know what would have happened if the staff hadn't intervened, but they handled it professionally. I went home shaking, but safe. Story 16. It's not a safe word or a secret drinking situation, but I'll always be grateful to that girl. I live near a metro station, and there's a kebab stand halfway to my house. It's always crowded, as everyone who enters the apartment buildings passes by. One day, two drunk guys were walking past me, but I didn't pay attention, I was lost in my thoughts and hungry. I walked into the kebab stand, since it was the closest to my house, and the two drunks followed me. I was in line to order, and the two were making comments about me and becoming increasingly aggressive. That's when I started feeling scared and uncomfortable. I had to place an order, and the girl at the counter loudly asked me if those two were with me. I said no. Then she asked me if I knew them. I said no. Then she asked them, in a very authoritative voice, to leave. She had such a powerful presence that the two drunks fell silent, apologized, and all that. I thanked him and left with my kebab. In this country where I live, it's unfortunately not common to tip, but if I had the chance, I would have tipped him. Story 17. So I didn't work in a bar, but in a sex toy store. I'm a 5 feet 11 inches woman, and most of my staff were also women. We regularly kicked out adult men for coming in and harassing women. That wasn't something we tolerated in the slightest. I would have a colleague stay with the woman and personally escort him out of the premises. He was never allowed back in the store. We built such a secure reputation that even non-customers would come into the store so we could scare off the harassers. I've been hit, spat on, had things thrown at me, yelled at, threatened, followed to my car, pulled from my car. But I'd do it all again in a heartbeat so I could make sure another woman was safe. Story 18. It's not the same, but once I was working at a convenience store, a customer who came in often came in and asked me to walk her to her car because her ex-boyfriend was outside and wouldn't leave her alone. I gladly obliged, I was the only guy in the store. But the guy must have laughed to himself when he saw my 5 feet 6 inches skinny ass escorting his ex to the car. He tried to talk to me, and I got between them and told him to leave or I'd call the police. He left peacefully and quickly, so that was the end of it for me. Story 19. I was working as a cashier and saw a male customer approach a female customer and bend down to say something to her. Whatever he said made her run to my register to buy her things. The guy followed her, but didn't say anything to her while she was in my line. When she bought her things and left, the guy stood by the double doors watching which way she went. I yelled to him to ask if he was going to buy her things, and he told me to just scan them and he'd pay when he was done. Now, this happened at Dollar General, which is notorious for never having the correct prices on the shelf, and I told him I couldn't charge him if he wasn't looking at the prices on the display to make sure he was getting the right price. He finally came after nagging me a lot, but he kept trying to look through the double doors between items. So I proceeded to open or tear up some items a little so that I would have to grab new things, because obviously it's a liability issue to sell an open bag of chips or bread if the customer wasn't the one who opened it, smiley face. She insulted me and called me stupid, but I took it as a victory because if she had time to do that instead of leaving immediately, it meant I had lost sight of her. Bonus, I told my store manager exactly what happened when she asked me about the damaged items, and she told me I did it right. I didn't get in trouble. Story 20. I used to eat a lot of lunches at a Middle Eastern deli, usually alone. The owner was a very friendly guy who chatted with me, occasionally gave me a free dessert, etc. One day, I finished lunch and was leaving the deli. That very day, I was riding my motorcycle, and a random guy followed me, presumably to ask me about the motorcycle. The deli owner flew out into the parking lot like an angry wasp. "Who are you? What do you want? Leave her alone. Get out of his way." Random guy left quickly. The deli owner said he wouldn't let me be bothered in his deli, ever. He wished me a good day and went back inside. It wasn't really a big deal, but as a woman who often walks alone, it's nice to know that sometimes there are people who look out for you and support you. Thanks, deli guy, I really miss your smiling face and your lamb kebabs. Story 21. I didn't use any key phrases, but I was eating pizza in a little park, one of those parks where you can see everything at once. And there, sitting, this guy comes up and starts talking to me, and I wasn't interested at all. I started saying a bunch of things that I thought were going to scare him off, and he was really insistent. So I went back to the pizza place, saying I needed to use the bathroom. Once inside, I asked if they had a back door to an alley or something, because the guy was giving me a really bad feeling and I needed an exit. One of the cooks led me through the kitchen, and I walked out the back. Thanks, Chris. Story 22. It's not exactly the same, but I was at a music festival in a foreign country. It was at night. The event was on the beach. As I was walking by, I saw a girl, clearly intoxicated and looking a little stressed, but able to move, with two guys following her. They didn't look like they were friends of hers to me. It looked like she was trying to get away from them. I may have known them, but at that moment, they weren't being friendly toward her, and my internal alarm bells went off. As they came closer, I said, "Hey. Glad I caught you. It's been a while." She was a little surprised, but I said, "I think our friends are around here, come walk with me." She backed off a little, and I said, "I just want to make sure you're okay." "Are you sure?" And she realized what I was asking. The two guys were hanging around a little behind, but starting to look disinterested. I asked her her name. She told me. We were standing opposite each other, holding hands. She kissed my hands and said, "Thank you. I love you." And she walked quickly away, disappearing into the crowd. The guys tried to keep up, but they were struggling, and they seemed to lose sight of her. I think about her from time to time, and I hope she had a safe weekend. Story 23. As someone who's been behind the bar and has dealt with this a few times, my main goals are to make the woman feel safe and push the guy away without hurting his ego. Do I care about his ego? No, but the results are much better if he doesn't go all out on the establishment, and probably better afterward, when the collective muscle of the staff isn't available to defend the woman. If he accepts rejection with dignity, it's much safer than if he's plotting revenge outside. Sometimes we take the girl out to the employees-only area to go out, sometimes we just keep them separate. It's up to the woman how she feels about it. Story 24. I've worked security for several events and clubs, and I always get a little creeped out when I see this topic come up, and I'll tell you why. Yes, there are definitely some places that have an advanced plan like the one described, and that's great, but there are many more that don't have anything, no code word, no fake drink order, etc. You also run the risk of your date knowing about this. Combine that with a server/waitress/bartender who has no idea what you're trying to do, and you've just made a bad situation worse. You're putting the responsibility for your safety in the hands of someone else who might not have a clue what you're talking about. The best thing you can do is find a way to separate yourself from the person and ask a staff member directly for help. Don't be shy or belabor the point, just say that you're afraid for your safety and need help. I feel like these types of discussions give people a false sense of security, and I wouldn't want to see someone fare worse because someone misinterpreted the intended signage. I can't tell you how many people have asked for help like this, and it's always the ones who are clear about what's going on and what they need who are the easiest to help. Story 25. Not the situation you asked about, but, there was an older woman with a man in his 30s at one of the local bars. The guy was completely out of sorts and very aggressive with the woman. When he got up to smoke, I sat down in his place and asked if she was okay. She explained that he was her son and that he'd been drinking all day. I started chatting amicably, and she seemed to appreciate it. When he came back, I refused to give up, my seat. He kept telling me to get up or he was going to beat the shit out of me. It's a local bar I used to go to after work regularly. I knew all the staff by name. One of the bartenders was an amateur hockey player, not that he needed backup, and he wasn't going to be messed around with drunk idiots. The young guy put his hands on me to push me off my stool. Matt, the bartender, was expecting this. In 2 or 3 seconds, Matt and I were on top of this guy. We didn't beat him up too badly, but we definitely landed some good punches and knees. The police took him away a few minutes later. Matt was quick to provide the video. The mother went home free and with a protective order. She came back the following Friday and thanked Matt and me. Apparently, he was going through unemployment and financial problems and was taking it out on his mother. Story 26. The first time I went to a club. My friends had just turned 18. I was still 17, but we arrived around 9. The guy at the door checked 3 IDs and then skipped the next 5 girls, just drew a line on our hands and warned us that the bartender wouldn't serve us anything. This guy, about 20 or so, came onto the dance floor and just grabbed me and dragged me to a table to talk. He grabbed my wrists to keep me from leaving. So hard I felt like my bones were cracking. One of my friends came over to see what was going on, but I didn't know what to do. I told her to ask me for an angel shot at the bar. I told him it was a non-alcoholic drink. The guy grabbing me offered to pay for it and loosened his grip enough to stop hurting me when I agreed. The bartender sent a girl over to see what was going on. She patted me on the shoulder but didn't do anything. The next person to arrive at the table was the bartender with a policeman, about 5 minutes after I ordered my drink. The jerk immediately let go of my hands. I danced with my friends for about 30 minutes, then we left. The police stopped the guy at the door when he tried to follow us. They said he could either stay with them while we left, or try to follow us and get arrested. He stayed with them while another officer walked us to my car. Story 27. Before safe words existed, I was bar hopping with 3 other women for a small, casual bachelorette party. I was, and still am, married at the time. We were meeting our respective partners at an all-night restaurant at the end of the night. We were all walking, it was downtown. There were bars on every block. We ended up in a literal basement bar. Pretty fun, actually, but it didn't take long to realize the only other women there worked there. It was us. And maybe 20 to 25 guys. College town. All drunk as skunks because everything was within walking distance. The bride-to-be was messed up beyond belief. After a few lap dances from her, I realized things were getting out of hand and decided to stop drinking. The problem was, a few guys had followed us from a previous bar and had also gathered more friends, and soon it seemed like they were making a coordinated effort to separate the 4 of us with the intention of us going home with different groups. Once this realization hit my boozy brain, it got a little scary. The group that was targeting me kept trying to buy me drinks and convince me to drink more. So I told the bartender, in no uncertain terms, not to give me any more alcohol. I still needed water or soda, it was hot. But not to put any alcohol in it, even if someone else ordered it or paid for it. I didn't want it. The bartender told me it was fine and then began watching everything that was going on very closely. Oh, they tried it, and he told them to fuck off. But I also saw him talking to another worker, not sure what his role was, and he really started keeping an eye on things. When the bride-to-be went to the bathroom, 2 guys went with her to help her since she was having trouble walking, and he immediately stopped them. He got a waitress to go with her. Don't worry, all the workers were very well tipped, we made sure of that, and the next day the bride-to-be went and tipped even more after she found out. When it was time to leave, a bunch of guys tried to join us. The bar workers tried to stop them, but the other sober girl and I assured them we'd be fine. Because we knew they were in for a surprise. The restaurant was only 2 blocks away, and our 4 respective partners were outside, almost in sight of the bar, waiting for us. None of the guys were too happy when the group gathered. Keep in mind, they were repeatedly told we were all engaged and getting together. I'm not sure why, but at least the group targeting me didn't believe me, even though I was wearing a wedding ring. One said I was wearing a ring on the wrong finger because it wasn't a diamond and therefore not an engagement ring. I love sapphires. I have no idea. But those workers at that bar were saints. And this was probably 30 years ago. Story 28. I haven't had to use a safe word, but I kind of had to play shield once for a friend in 2010. I was at a bar with a big group. This guy kept grabbing my friend, trying to get her to dance with him. Eventually, she came up to me, hugged me, and whispered in my ear, "Can you be my fake boyfriend?" I saw the guy behind her. I hadn't realized what was going on until that moment, but something about this guy gave me the creeps just by looking at him. After she hugs me, he comes up behind her and grabs her arm and shoulder to pull her away from me. I calmly but firmly pushed my palm into his chest and said, "What the fuck are you doing to my girlfriend? She doesn't know you." He protested, saying I wasn't really her boyfriend, blah blah blah. I insisted that she was and that she back off. She hovered around the edge of our group for a while longer, watching my friend and I dance and hug each other until she finally left. She was very scared and it scared her a lot, and it was eye-opening to me because I'd never seen that kind of behavior in person before. My friend and I ended up hooking up that night and a few more times over the next 2 years. I still consider her a friend, and she's a super chill, nice girl, but I haven't seen her in a while. I hope she hasn't had to use the fake boyfriend trick or a code word since that night, but I wouldn't be surprised if she has.